Welcome to the Accidental Experts podcast. I'm your host, Bryce Hamilton. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a child and family therapist. I have been in practice for over 15 years, and I'm also a mom of 4. So I know the challenges both professionally and personally. I'm so glad that you're here today to grow your parenting toolbox. Please come as you are and be ready to learn. My goal is to make you the accidental expert so that you can raise healthy humans. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm so glad you're here today. Today, we're going to talk to an expert, Meredith Woodring. She has had over 23 years of experience in speech and language pathology, and she has worked with both 0 to elementary school students. So 0 to 3 is infant toddler services, which is where she's now, but she's also worked with early childhood and elementary school students. So she's going to help us break down what would be reasons that our kids might need speech services, and how to know if we qualify, and kind of how to get access to those services. So with that, let's get to Meredith.
Hi, Bryce. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here. So you're going to help us understand what speech therapy is and what speech therapy looks like for different kids of different ages. So let's start with, what is speech therapy?
Well, speech therapy is the practice of assessing and treating communication disorders in people from infancy to elderly. So it can occur in home-based services, in a private clinic, schools, in a hospital, a rehab setting, or a residential care setting. So really across the whole lifespan.
Oh, that's cool. So it's not just for little kids.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. So what do speech therapists do?
So we work to improve communication deficits or delays. We're really here to support the communication needs of our clients. So this could fall into 5 different areas. One of the most common areas that people probably think about is speech. So this is the articulation of sounds or how words are produced. The second area is language. So language kind of falls into two categories. The first one is expressive language. So this would be building vocabulary, learning to put words together and expressing ideas. It could also mean receptive understanding of language. So that would be following directions and that kind of thing. And then the third area of speech therapy would be social communication or pragmatic language. This would be like conversational speech, asking and answering questions. Sometimes topic maintenance is a part of that. Really just those nonverbal communication skills like eye contact and body language. And then another area that people might kind of think about when they think about speech therapy is fluency. So this would be like stuttering. That's kind of the most common area of fluency. It could be when kids are repeating the first sound of a word, or they might repeat the whole word or part of a word. And sometimes they'll have prolongations and they'll kind of hold the sound out. And then the other area of speech therapies that I really don't see a whole lot of is voice. This is issues with the quality of your voice. So this could be where the voice is hoarse or breathy, or sometimes people will get vocal nodules or have a paralyzed vocal cord. So speech therapists can help with that.
Wow, you guys do a lot of things, so many more things than I even realized. And I send people to speech therapy, and I had no idea you guys have such a plethora of things that you're knowledgeable about.
Yeah. It's really cool because even though we might all have the same credentials behind our name, depending on what setting you work in, you could be doing a completely different job.
Yeah. Wow. That's really cool. So why would a kid need speech therapy? So when we're talking to parents, right, to help them understand why this might be applicable to their kid, why might a kid need speech therapy?
Yeah, so a child might need speech therapy when there is a delay in their communication skills, especially if this impacts their daily routines or negatively impacts their ability to participate in age-appropriate activities. So school districts are going to look for a delay that is significantly discrepant from their same age peers. We get referrals from pediatricians or from parents, or in the schools that could come from teachers.
Yeah, so maybe they're not pronouncing a word. You said articulation earlier, so how a sound is made. So they may not be sounding a word out correctly or having a repetitive error. So that might be a reason. Or maybe they're having trouble understanding. You said receptive language, or being able to express their ideas.
Right.
Very cool. So why do you think that speech therapy is so important? And maybe you could talk about, I know with a lot of the things I'm educating parents on is early intervention being really key, but like, why do you think speech therapy is important?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said early intervention. That is, that's where I live. That's the age that I work with. So I believe speech therapy is important because communication impacts everyone. So all ages and every stage of life. So even babies are communicating as infants through their cry or gestures. They might learn some sign language and then move on to words, phrases, and then sentences. And then as their language develops, sometimes speech sound errors are present, which impacts the listener's ability to understand what that person's saying. So the way someone speaks can be distracting from the message or idea that they're trying to get across. And it can also be frustrating for the person speaking when there's a communication breakdown. So the early intervention piece is really important because we want kids to be successful when they go to school. So early intervention is really giving kids that foundation right from the start. So that birth to 3 age is a really rapid time of development and growth. So those areas are the ideal time for intervention.
Yeah, and it makes sense because a lot of what we're also talking about on the podcast just generally is that when we do the same thing a lot of times, it takes a lot of effort to undo whatever that is. So if our anxiety is high and so our response is to withdraw and then we practice that 100,000 times, then it's going to be harder to get that kid out of that behavior, just like with speech. So if you're saying your R sound incorrectly, then the more times you practice it incorrectly, the harder it will be for them to overcome that challenge.
Exactly. It's muscle memory. If you think about it, it's just like working out or working any other muscle in your body, the muscles in your mouth and all of the articulators, whether it be your lips or your tongue and what you're doing with all of that, coordinating those sounds. If you practiced that incorrectly for a long time, those are going to definitely be the harder ones to change and to improve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we talked about why it's important and kind of what you do. How do parents advocate for their kids? So let's say they hear this episode and they're like, "Oh, I do think, we're lacking on the amount of words that we're able to say, or we are having a consistent error, or we have lots of different errors, but maybe no consistency." How do parents advocate for their kid to get the services that they need, or how do they know that speech therapy would be a service they could have?
Yeah, so I always ask parents to talk to their child's pediatrician first. So as a parent, you are your child's first teacher and you know your kiddo best. So trust that and reach out to a professional if you have concerns. You can ask for an evaluation. If they are between the ages of 0 and 3, you could contact their local infant toddler program for the county where they live. And then for ages 3 to 5, you could call the early childhood program for the school district where you live. And then when kids are already attending elementary school, you could talk to the classroom teacher, express your concerns, ask for an evaluation or a screening. And then sometimes for those elementary school aged kids, you could just reach out directly to the building speech language pathologist or principal.
Yeah, cool. So okay, so we're talking about these services. Is this something that falls under IEP laws, or like those things where like a kid who gets speech services, let's say, even if they're through infant toddler services, their county or their early childhood or elementary school, is that something that you guys would write a particular plan for?
Yep, exactly. So I say we because I'm speaking from the birth to 3 population, but we fall under the same law, so that IDEA. So when kids are in the birth to 3 program, we write what's called an IFSP, and it stands for an Individualized Family Service Plan. So it's basically just the legal document that outlines the goals and objectives that the parents want to work on. And then when kids are in the school age, so really it actually starts at 3 to 5 for early childhood or elementary or beyond that, they would write up a plan called an IEP, like you were referring to, the Individualized Education Plan. They're very similar in that they're legal documents under that law, the IDEA law, that outline the goals or objectives that that kiddo is going to be working on.
Yeah, so it assures that everybody's working on the same objective and we are checking for making progress, et cetera,
Yeah.
so that we're eventually, hopefully, able to get them out of speech services.
Exactly. And that really is essentially the goal when, especially at that early childhood or infant toddler age from birth to 3 or from 3 to 5. It's something to celebrate when kids don't need that services anymore. And so when we're ready for exit or to dismiss from services, it's awesome because it just really shows that early intervention works and they're just ready to fly on their own.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, this has all been incredibly insightful information and good for us. And I've learned something too. So I love this. Tell me, what do you want parents to take away from this conversation? What do you want them to remember?
I think one thing is just that speech therapy supports people across their lifespan. So communication is happening from day one of life, all the way until, people in assisted living communities and that kind of thing. The other thing would be speech therapists work to support people in a variety of ways and settings. Early intervention is key. So that's a huge piece. It really is a key for success in school. And then you as the parent are your child's first teacher. You know them best, and you will be their advocate when they need support in any area of development. And then lastly, just talk to your child's doctor if you have concerns, or reach out to your local infant toddler program or school team if you have concerns about your kiddo.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you so much, Meredith, for all this amazing information.
Of course. Thanks for having me again. It was fun to talk to you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Meredith. That was all really helpful information. I think it's really important that we intervene early for any speech issues. And I see that in my practice is that when kids are not having these speech or language difficulties managed when they're young, then that can become an issue that causes them to have low self-esteem. So for me, speech and language services are really important because not only does it help us to communicate ourselves, and that's obviously something that's really important in being able to express our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts, but also because it helps them to be able to feel like their peers. And so being able to get those services helps them to feel typical and understood. And so with that, that is just a really important piece of being a kid and navigating through life. Thank you so much for your time today. I think that we have fantastic shows coming down the pike. And if you have other ideas, please email us at accidentalexperts@gmail.com. Like us and subscribe to our show, share us with friends, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. With that, we'll see you next week. Have a great day. Some words from our legal team.
The information presented in this podcast is not intended or implied to be a substitute for appropriate professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content, including text, graphics, images, and information contained on or available through this podcast, is for general information purposes only. This podcast makes no representations and assumes no responsibility for the accuracy or information on or available through this podcast, and such information is subject to change without notice. You are encouraged to confirm any information obtained through this program with other sources and review all information regarding any condition or treatment with the appropriate professionals.
What we're saying is, yes, I am a real therapist, but I'm not your therapist.